Have you ever experienced a moment where reality seemed to hesitate for half a second, like the world skipped a frame and then pretended nothing happened? Maybe you thought of someone you haven't spoken to in years, and your phone buzzed with their name before you could even question it. Or maybe you've walked into a room and felt a strange certainty that you've already lived that exact moment, down to the smallest detail, as if your life briefly revealed a hidden backstage. Most people brush this off as coincidence, but deep down something inside you knows that explanation doesn't sit right, because it wasn't random. It felt precise, intentional, almost like a glitch in a hidden reality you're not supposed to notice. Here's the uncomfortable truth most people never say out loud. When these moments happen, it's not because your mind is malfunctioning, it's because your perception briefly slipped outside the default program. You felt it, that subtle tension in your chest, that quiet thought whispering, something is off. And the reason it feels unsettling is because it threatens the story you've been told your entire life about how reality works. Modern science talks about probability, neurons, and chance, but quantum consciousness suggests something far more disturbing, that reality responds, adjusts, and reacts to observation itself. That what you call normal life may actually be a carefully stabilized loop, designed to keep your awareness pointed outward, distracted, compliant. Most people never question this because comfort is easier than truth. But if you're here, watching this, there's a reason. You've sensed the hidden reality behind the surface patterns. You've felt moments where the world seemed to look back at you. And that's not an accident. Because once you begin to notice the cracks, the system responds. Not to stop you, but to test whether you're ready to see what's beyond them. And in the next few minutes, I'm going to show you the one shift almost no one makes. The shift that determines whether you stay inside the matrix or finally see the exit forming right in front of you. If that feeling resonates with you, don't rush past it. This isn't passive content meant to entertain you for a few minutes and disappear. What's happening here is collective recognition, a quiet signal passed between people who can sense when a system no longer tells the whole truth. When you engage with this video, you're not boosting an algorithm. You're marking yourself as someone who refuses to sleepwalk through a manufactured reality. That simple act tells this platform, and more importantly tells others like you, that a conscious tribe is forming. If you feel aligned with that, anchor yourself here, not as a follower, but as a participant in an unfolding movement of awareness. And before we go deeper, leave a short mark in the comments, not a story, not an explanation, just this phrase, I choose awareness. It's not for me. It's a signal to everyone else watching that they're not alone. Now that the intention is set, it's time to move from intuition to evidence. Because what you're sensing isn't mystical guesswork. It's rooted in experiments that quietly rewrote our understanding of reality itself. Let's look at what science discovered and why it was never meant to feel comfortable. In 1801, an English physicist named Thomas Young performed what seemed like a simple optics experiment at the Royal Institution in London. He passed light through two narrow slits and expected it to behave like particles, producing two clean bands on a screen. Instead, the light created an interference pattern, a wave-like signature, as if each particle somehow knew about the other slit. For decades, this result was treated as a curiosity. But in the 20th century, the experiment was repeated with single photons, fired one at a time under strict laboratory conditions. In 1982, physicist Alain Aspect and his team at the Institut d'Optique in France pushed it even further, showing that the act of measurement itself changed the outcome. When the system was observed, the wave collapsed into a particle. When it wasn't, the wave remained. This became known as the observer effect, and it quietly fractured the foundation of classical reality. Mainstream explanations often soften the implication, claiming the measuring device is the cause. But that explanation avoids the deeper question. Why does information, the knowledge of observation, alter physical behavior at all? The quantum field does not respond to force the way classical objects do. It responds to interaction, to awareness, to the presence of an observer. And this means that you are not just inside reality, you are participating in how it resolves itself. Every time you focus, anticipate, or emotionally charge an outcome, you are not merely reacting to the world. You are influencing which potential becomes real. If that feels unsettling, it should, because it mirrors something you've likely felt long before you understood the science. Those moments when life seemed to reorganize itself the second you stopped forcing it. the strange way solutions appear when you release control, the heaviness you feel when you obsess, and the flow that follows surrender. That isn't imagination, it's resonance. Consciousness expansion isn't about gaining mystical powers. It's about realizing that awareness is already embedded into the structure of the quantum field. But here's the part most people never hear. If observation can collapse possibilities into outcomes, then the opposite is also true. There are conditions under which observation traps you inside repetitive patterns, reinforcing the same results over and over again. And once you understand how that loop is created, you'll start to see why breaking it requires doing something completely counterintuitive, something almost no one is willing to try. What happens next takes the science out of the laboratory and places it directly inside your body. In the early 1990s, researchers studying coherence in complex systems began noticing something strange. When separate oscillating systems synchronize, they begin to exchange information more efficiently, even without direct contact. One of the institutions that explored this phenomenon deeply was the HeartMath Institute, where physicists and neuroscientists measured how coherent emotional states altered electromagnetic patterns produced by the human body. What they found challenged reductionist thinking. The heart produces a measurable field that extends beyond the body, and when emotional coherence increases, that field becomes more ordered, more stable, more influential. This wasn't philosophy, it was data, and it suggested that resonance as not force is how systems align, and this explains why certain moments in your life feel different at a physical level. That subtle tingling in your hands when you suddenly know what decision to make, the warmth in your chest when something finally clicks, the calm clarity that arrives without logic, without effort. Those sensations aren't random, they are markers of alignment. When your internal state synchronizes with a larger pattern in the quantum field, information moves faster than thought. Intuition isn't guessing, it's resonance before language. Consciousness expansion often begins as a bodily signal, long before the mind tries to claim it. If you've ever felt exhausted from trying to figure everything out, this is why. Forcing outcomes creates interference. Resonance creates flow. The observer effect doesn't just collapse possibilities, it entrains them. When your attention, emotion, and expectation fall into coherence, reality responds with less resistance. And when they don't, life feels heavy, repetitive, misaligned. That loop isn't punishment, it's feedback. This is where things become personal, because if resonance shapes outcomes, then your internal state matters more than the strategies you've been taught to chase. And that realization can be uncomfortable. It means facing the moments where you've ignored your own signals, the times you felt the warning in your body and chose familiarity instead. Before we go any further, pause for a second. Notice what you're feeling right now, not the thought, the sensation. That quiet response is where the real shift begins. There's a side of this understanding that almost no one talks about, because once you begin to see how reality actually responds, it becomes harder to participate in it the way everyone else does. You start noticing how many conversations revolve around distraction, how often people numb themselves instead of listening to what they feel, and there's a quiet loneliness in that. Not because you think you're better than anyone, but because you can't unsee what you've seen. There were moments when I questioned whether this awareness was worth the cost. Moments of doubt, of wanting to go back to a simpler way of moving through the world without constantly sensing the undercurrents beneath everything. Carrying this perspective can feel isolating, especially when you realize that most people aren't ready to question the structures that keep them comfortable. And fear shows up too. Fear of misinterpreting signals. Fear of trusting your inner knowing when it goes against logic or expectation. Fear of being wrong. Fear of being alone in it. This isn't enlightenment theater. It's human weight. The kind you feel late at night when you wonder whether listening to yourself will cost you relationships, stability, or certainty. The ego doesn't fracture loudly. It cracks quietly in moments where you realize that growth isn't glamorous. It's honest, and honesty can sting. If any of that feels familiar, you don't need to explain it. You don't need to justify it, just recognize it. Because the people who resonate with this message aren't looking for escape, they're looking for alignment. And if you're here, still listening, that says more than words ever could. Stay close to this space, not because it has answers, but because it respects the questions you're already carrying. What comes next isn't about forcing change. It's about reclaiming the part of you that already knows how to move forward. What you've been calling a flaw your entire life was never a defect. That constant sense of being slightly out of sync, the feeling that you notice things others don't, the quiet discomfort with routines that seem to satisfy everyone else, none of that is evidence that something is wrong with you. It's evidence that your perception is operating beyond the default resolution. Throughout this journey, we've moved from unsettling experiences like déjà vu and synchronicity into hard science, the observer effect, the quantum field, resonance, coherence, and every step points to the same conclusion. Reality is not fixed, and consciousness is not a byproduct. It's a participant. When you feel different, it's not because you're broken, it's because your awareness is picking up more information than the system was designed to reward. This reframes everything. The exhaustion you felt isn't weakness. It's the cost of perceiving patterns in a world optimized for distraction. The moments of clarity that arrive without explanation aren't accidents. They're your internal state briefly aligning with a deeper structure. And the reason so many people feel trapped isn't because they lack effort or intelligence, but because they've been taught to override perception in favor of compliance. You've felt the tension between those two forces. That tension is the doorway. Here's the master key most people never receive. Expansion doesn't come from adding something new. It comes from removing interference. When attention softens, when the need to control collapses, when the observer stops gripping the outcome, reality reorganizes itself with surprising efficiency. This isn't mysticism. It's the same principle we saw in the experiments. Potential resolves differently depending on how it's engaged. Your awareness doesn't need to be louder. It needs to be clearer. But there's a final implication that rarely gets spoken, and it shouldn't be rushed. If perception can expand, it can also be guided, not manipulated by others, but shaped by internal alignment. And that raises a question most people avoid because of what it demands next. If reality responds to awareness, then what happens when awareness becomes deliberate? That question isn't meant to be answered here. It's meant to follow you. Because the next step isn't about belief, it's about responsibility. And once you see that, you'll start noticing that the world doesn't look quite the same anymore. Before you leave, seal this moment, not with agreement, but with intention. In the comments, write this single line: I accept awareness over comfort. Don't explain it. Don't justify it. That sentence isn't for performance, it's a marker, a quiet signal that tells others like you that the pattern has been recognized. If this perspective resonates, don't stand outside it. Step into it. This channel isn't built for passive viewers or casual curiosity. It's a gathering point for people who sense that reality is more responsive than they were taught and who are ready to move through it with clarity instead of fear. Joining here isn't about following a creator. It's about aligning with a conscious current that values perception, responsibility, and truth over noise. And if you felt something shift while watching this, don't stop now. The next step goes further, and it challenges one of the most ingrained habits humans rely on when they want change. Stop praying. Start collapsing. How to force the quantum field to align. Your consciousness brought you here. What happens now is your choice.